各位議員，我哋夠鐘。
Members, good morning. We've formed a quorum and it's already our appointed time, so may I call the meeting to order. Please invite the administration and members to join us now, or rather the deputations.
我睇到你啊，毛孟靜議員而家。
Miss Claudia Mo, I can see you now.
嗱，我哋今日嗰個議程。
The agenda for this morning is to invite the deputations to give us their views first, and then we'll invite the administration to give us a response. We've got a paper from the administration already. Paper CB1 1620/1213(1). It's been circulated to members, and the Secretariat has also prepared a fact sheet for us, FS 32/1213. Let's wait for deputations to settle down. Please invite them in. It's because the deputations have not yet, some deputations have not yet arrived because of the rain. To save time, let's get started first, while other deputations are arriving because of the rain. Perhaps they are stuck in the traffic. So we invite the deputations to speak first, and when others have arrived, we'll give them time. Thank you very much for coming to us at such short notice. In particular, I'd like to thank the industry for making it at such short notice. Each speaker will have up to 4 minutes to speak, and may I remind you that your remarks will not be protected by the Electrical Powers and Privileges Ordinance. In front of you, or rather opposite you, there is a timer. When your time is up, it will give you a gentle reminder. So you have to finish your sentence and then give the floor to the next speaker. First, I'll invite Mr. Dr. Jackie Lau from Hong Kong Recyclable Materials and Reproduction Business General Association Limited. Good morning, Chairman and members of the panel. I'd like to discuss so-called foreign rubbish this morning. Usually, after recovery, we will note the weight and report it to the relevant contractors and property management agencies. For FEHD contracts, the contractors will report to the FEHD directly the weight recovered. So recyclers can only know part of the picture, so we won't be sure of the overall recovery rate. So that is our general practice. Regarding the piling of foreign rubbish in Hong Kong, we'll talk about plastics. We don't have to worry too much because they cannot be imported into the mainland anymore, and therefore there will be no new importation into Hong Kong. So the amount is not going to increase. Will they be dumped at our landfills subsequently? Well, I have checked the landfills. I don't see a large amount of plastics being dumped there. And plastic materials, well, after all, we have to pay to get that imported into Hong Kong, about $300 to $500 per ton. Because of the re-export trade, I don't think the traders would just dump them at landfills. The green fence operation, or Operation Green Fence OGF, is going to be a long-term policy. So many contractors have purchased plants to break up the plastics for importation or export into China. How can we block foreign rubbish from being imported in Hong Kong? I've said to the EPD on various occasions, recyclers are willing to be regulated by means of a licensing system. Transshipment traders, now if we have a licensing scheme, then on the mainland they have a similar system. They give tax to the China customs, and you need only to attach a label, and the container loads, for instance, if they are heading for Shantung, then they can just leave Hong Kong. There will be no such rubbish stuck in Hong Kong. And EPD can also inspect our plants on a regular basis. While we are on short-term tenancies, EPD inspects us every 2 to 3 weeks. That's perfectly okay because our trade is perfectly legal. I think it is good because it will eliminate the illegal practices which are happening in the NT. And imported plastic materials are of proper quality. However, some unscrupulous traders overseas do not sort the rubbish, and so there can be 20 to 30% of unrecyclable waste stuck in Hong Kong. So I think it is a must that we set up a licensing regime for regulation so that there can be proper sorting of foreign rubbish. Thank you. Mr. Lee Heng Tek, Managing Director of Hong Kong Telford Envirotech Group Limited. Good morning, and members of the panel. I'm going to spend my 4 minutes on another aspect of recycling. On the 23rd of July, when I came to talk about the producer responsibility scheme of the levy on plastic bags, Mr. Wong Ting Kong asked, why don't we have a factory in Hong Kong for recycling plastic bags? And Mr. Gary Chen asked why the levy collected is not for environmental protection causes. Well, in 2008 we were granted land, and in 2009 we built a factory for recycling plastic bags. However, in July the same year, the levy was passed, and the levy was not really used for turning plastic bags into shopping bags as proposed by Mr. Gary Chen. So originally we planned to build a 30-meter tall plant, and we decided to shelve the plan. Meanwhile, well, for the sorting of plastic bags, after 2009, or in the early days, we had a lot of civic education, because after 2009, plastic bags were no longer regarded as recyclable materials. So we have one item less from our list of waste that can be treated. And then after 2009, with the introduction of the levy on plastic bags, there's no longer a factory for processing of waste plastic bags. And Ms. Ho asked us for some figures. Well, in the mainland, plastic bags, waste plastic bags, cost over $2,000 per ton, whereas if it is for importation of such bags is $2,500 per ton. So there is no question of dumping such bags into our landfills. Now, the levy. Now, since we do impose a levy on plastic bags, it is the administration's responsibility to handle this problem. If retailers are going to levy the charge directly, then you will play the role of referee, and instead of a levy, if you are going to introduce a charge on plastic bags, are you saying that plastic bags is not a kind of material that can be recycled? Another issue is if we continue to invest in a green industry in Hong Kong, if the levy on plastic bag has kicked plastic bags out of our recyclable waste list, I can't see how we are going to proceed. But your proposed levy on glass bottles would ensure that waste glass can be turned into products. I hope that there can be another way of imposing the levy on plastic bags so that we can have our own plant in Hong Kong to recycle plastic bags. Thank you. Next, Ms. Joanne Lee, Director General of Environment, Hong Kong Federation of Environmental and Hygienic Services. Thank you. Because of the OGF on the mainland, the whole market is of the view that a steering committee should be set up. My federation has some views on this. Well, the two speakers before me have talked about foreign rubbish, so I will talk about the setting of a steering committee first. So this committee is called Steering Committee on the recycling industry. I think we should start with source. We should start with the cleaning contractors and also the recyclers, and then the manufacturers that can turn waste into products. Cleaning contractors or OCs or members of the public control over 80% of the waste generated, because cleaning workers spend their leisure time or rest time to take out materials with recycling value out. Take plastics, glass, and timber as an example. Most contractors will ask their workers to sort the waste. Now, the standard statutory minimum wage is $30. Will a contractor pay their workers to recover recyclable materials that are not worth $30? Now, I've been in this industry for 7 years, so there are bound to be peaks and troughs in the year. Now, for plastics, they are now stuck in Hong Kong. How can we avoid this? We want some assistance be given to us. We should provide assistance to contractors as well as OCs so that they have the incentive to sort recyclable waste from the overall waste so that they can increase their income or lower their processing costs. so that we can ensure that even recyclable materials of lower value can be sorted out from waste. The recyclers, they are a bit different from their counterpart overseas. We do not have one big company to get all the tenders and sell the recyclable materials to different companies. In Hong Kong, the materials will go to companies in the mainland that are willing to pay. This is very unhealthy. But why is foreign rubbish stuck in Hong Kong? Because there are green traders. Recyclable materials of high value are sold to the mainland, and those that nobody like are kept in Hong Kong. Now we can use glass to make bricks for paving the road, and we can turn timber and also waste paper into useful materials. So if we can have through production line from cleaning contractors to manufacturers, and I want the Secretary to think about green procurement as well. Thank you. Ms. Miranda Yip, Assistant Manager from Friends of the Earth Hong Kong. Good morning. Last evening, Friends of the Earth invited an expert to meet with our members. It's been a long time before I saw that our meeting room was so full, because the public are very concerned about this subject. We had someone engaged in international trade. He specializes in waste plastics in the U.S. So in the past month, he has been checking on the recycling industry of plastics in Hong Kong. So he took pictures and showed us that the plastics in Hong Kong are very dirty. Even if high-quality plastics have been sorted out according to his standard, they are still substandard, because we have different materials lumped together. There can be different categories of plastics. While I cannot exhaust all the different types of plastics, such plastics, if they are dumped together, this is not really sorting. As a result, the total waste will have lower value. According to that expert, high-quality waste plastics can be sold at $500 per ton. Why do we have this problem? Because of the OGF on the mainland. Some re-exporters have abused our system and have imported plastics of very low quality into Hong Kong, and they are stuck here, as can be seen from the photos. You can call them waste plastics, but in fact they can be better described as refuse. In 1996, foreign rubbish were already stuck in Hong Kong, and this is already 2013. Why do you have to come back and revisit this topic? So the Customs and Excise and the EPD have not done too good a job in gatekeeping. Our waste disposal ordinance require waste plastics to be sorted. This can be found in Annex 6. So long as the importer declares that the plastics have not been polluted, there is no need for another declaration with the EPD. So these traders are abusing our system. Waste plastics of very low quality imported into Hong Kong. They do not need any documents, and we cannot check their quality as well.
And as a specialist said last night, he said a lot of places would allow export of these foreign refuse, but not importing them. That is to say that these cannot be returned after they have been sent out by these countries. And where do the refuse go? We are worried. And also there is another point. The departments should pay attention to the fact that with the introduction of OGF in the mainland, do we have to review how we sort these refuse? We must not allow entrepot of this kind of foreign refuse anymore. And also, we also have to clarify the calculations. Have we been boosting without basis the figures? And what about the blueprint? Would it really, the blueprint for lowering levels of volume of refuse, would that really help? We have to review that. Yes, and next we have Mr. Lee from Professional Power Youth Committee. Thank you. Concerning the EDP's decision to extend the landfills without regard to public opinion, it's shown that it is a failure. On the one hand, the recycling traders have been allowed to import foreign refuse into Hong Kong and therefore filling up the Hong Kong landfills unnecessarily quickly. Basel Treaty Clause 52 stipulates that the refuse that are exported can be returned to its place of origin. Had that been followed and executed and enforced in Hong Kong, and also with the EDB's sanction, refuse even from outside of Hong Kong can be dumped into the landfills of Hong Kong. Is that true? Please do not give empty promises that there will be any amendments of the ordinances. Would you please specifically say when this loophole will be plucked in Hong Kong by means of ordinance? What is the date? Now, the seniors in the industry have spoken just now concerning plastics and electronics waste. In fact, without waste levy and without lowering of waste at the source effectiveness at this point, the recycling rate is strangely high in Hong Kong. How has that come by, that rate? Would Mr. Wong please today tell us what exactly is the waste recycling rate? Please do not inflate the rate without basis. And today, Oriental Daily had claimed that 190 containers of foreign waste had been repatriated to Hong Kong because of the OGF operation. The mainland had refused entry, and some 89 containers are still accumulating in Hong Kong. 90% are plastics. And if only 10% of them are dumped into the landfills in Hong Kong, this is overly much, because this is not generated by Hong Kong or in Hong Kong. Why can this kind of refuse be dumped in Hong Kong landfills? This is really swindling the Hong Kong people. Now, for the residents in Tuen Mun, Takuling, and Tseung Kwan O, they are really incensed, because you say that recycling rate will have to be raised and there will have to be lowering of waste at source. But on the other hand, these measures have not been effective. And on the other hand, there is a claim that the landfills are insufficient for the waste generated. And this is very, this has really incensed the residents and people of Hong Kong. And Ms. Christine Luk said that the waste will be dumped into the landfills, and the landfills will be extended. And also at the time of your extension to the positions, you have already mentioned that this is a problem, that is foreign waste coming into Hong Kong. And why have you not said anything until the media have exposed that? And why did you not say that the recycling rate or the recycling rate was false? Why? Please tell us exactly what happened. Yes. Next, we will have Ms. Chen Shek-kwan from the Federation of Hong Kong Recycling. Yes, my colleagues have already spoken, colleagues from the industry. I would like to talk about the re-export of refuse coming through Hong Kong. Our estimate is that there are 300 tons of containers and consolidated containers and other ways coming through Hong Kong. In fact, some of them have gone into the mainland, and in that process, about 8 to 10% have gone into the Hong Kong landfills. Why do we say that? Now, for the plastic bottles, we will have to break them when we press them. And also there are other refuse. When we press them, there are lots of sludge inside them. And also in the plastic bottles, there are some waste materials inside the bottles themselves. Then there may be some 300,000 of such tons of such processed waste that are accumulated in Hong Kong. And from past experience, for the mainland customs in the past years, and every year there would be a few months where the refuse cannot be sent into the mainland. And some of the mainland traders have themselves directly rented Hong Kong site to accumulate and store these plastics waste. And to see whoever is going down and cannot sustain, they will acquire these storage. And these are in very far-off sites in Hong Kong, and nobody oversees or inspects or controls them. And we have seen in recent years that the fires that occurred in these sites are really coming out from this kind of storage. And the insurance companies are refusing our taking out a policy because of these fires, or at least the premium would be charged very high. Now, the mainland situation is very bad. We're focusing on plastics now, but in fact, waste paper is also becoming a problem. Now, in the mainland, there is a downturn of the industry for paper manufacturing, and waste paper is at very, very low fees or rates for the recycling industry. Now, because of the rentals and labor costs, etc., our cost levels are very high. And of course, we do not want to run a loss. So when it comes to the cleaners, the janitors, the old ladies collecting refuse, we cannot give them much, and they are therefore not incentivized to collect and turn the refuse to us. And would you please also think, if they do not turn the refuse to us, where does the refuse go? Association of New Territories Open Storage Operators Limited, Mr. Wong Kin Cheng, please. No, I have nothing to supplement. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Barry Lee, Hong Kong Waste Management Association. No, because of the limitation of time, we will focus on 5 points. First of all, our association is in support of the Blueprint 2003 promulgated in May by the Hong Kong government, and the Blueprint for Sustainable Use of Resources 2013 to 2022. And also we are in support of generators of refuse levy, and also the reduction of waste at source. And also the levies that are received should be set up to set up a fund for recycling industry, so as to fund the further development of the local recycling industry. And also there should be a licensing system for recycling trade. We would want the government to consider that. There may be some over 1,000 or street-side recycling operations in order to step up with the control of this entire industry and the practice of this industry, I think the licensing system is absolutely necessary. The fifth point is that we hope that the government can step up with its control of second-hand refuse, the import and export system of that, so that the any loophole can be plugged and there would not be any foreign rubbish accumulating in Hong Kong. Those are the 5 points from our association. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Wong to respond. And there is a document, the code of which I have already mentioned. The Secretary for Environment, Mr. Wong Kam Sing, is with us here today. And the Assistant Director, Dr. Alan Chan, as well, Assistant Director, Mr. David Wong, as well as the Customs and Excise Department Head of Intelligence Bureau, Mr. Lam Chun Kung, and Customs and Excise Department Group Head Ports Control, Mr. Vincent Wong. Mr. Wong, please. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a slide prepared for the meeting today to talk about the recycling for MSW. Thank you very much for the deputations for coming up to share with us their views. And we are talking about the recycling rate and also imported waste. You would know that there is a ordinance to govern the waste disposal. And in Hong Kong, we allow import and export of unharmful waste, but any such imported waste to be disposed in Hong Kong is completely illegal. The EDP and the CNED would enforce the ordinance. For imported waste, if they are valuable raw materials which fetch a consideration internationally as part of the international trade, that is admissible in Hong Kong. And there is the Operation Green Fence in the mainland. Let us talk about our response to it. Now, starting in February, the OGF had been promulgated in China, and in the ports there had been a stepping up of control and of the waste imports at the ports of China. And we have been closely in liaison with the mainland departments. And for containers that are repatriated in Hong Kong, when the containers reach Hong Kong, we would liaise with the persons in charge and follow up to trail these containers to make sure that they actually leave the Hong Kong territory. Now, since the start of the year to 22nd of July, we have received a number of 189 containers that are repatriated to Hong Kong, and they include waste metals and waste papers, and over half of them have already left Hong Kong, and the remaining 87 containers are also arranged for departure. Of course, we are all concerned that there is this industry for import and export of waste, but have they impacted the landfills and the volume in Hong Kong? You have to know that there is a very stringent control for this dumping into the landfills. For any vehicles going through and into the landfills, they have to stop at the bridge for weighing and inspection, and also the drivers are to open the hood covers of their vehicles to facilitate inspection by site staff, and also there will be a taking down of the relevant information, including load and vehicle registration number, etc. And in the past records, the EDP has not found large loads of waste plastics or materials with recyclable value that are dumped into the landfills.
Since the introduction of OGF in the mainland, we have tightened our monitoring at landfills and refuse transfer stations. Now, if we have any suspicion, we will require the information of the driver for follow-up. And we have space at landfills for temporary stockpiling of suspected waste material plastics for inspection. So according to observation, the waste plastics dumped at our landfills are high-polluting waste plastics generated locally. As for the record, in the past 10 years, well, the percentage of waste plastics in our MSW has maintained at a steady level, and we have not seen a rapid increase in the percentage of waste plastics in our MSW. However, to ensure that they will not be illegally dumped in Hong Kong, we have introduced a disposal arrangement of locally generated waste plastics. EPD will first go to the recyclers to check, to ascertain the source of the waste plastics found there. If they're generated locally, then we'll try to find a way out for them in Hong Kong. We will try to avoid dumping our landfills as far as possible. We have received the first application, and the waste plastics have been sent to eco-packs for processing. We'll continue to liaise with the trade very closely, and as far as I understand, the trade has adjusted the importation volume because of the OGF, and they've also introduced sorting procedures to ensure that there are proper outlets for such plastics. I know members are concerned about the statistics on import and export of waste plastics. Actually, such claims in recent reports are not substantiated because Hong Kong is a free port which imposes no tariffs. However, recyclers might be categorizing imported and exported plastics differently. And the figure of exported waste plastics have always increased the total amount of imported plastics in the past 5 years. We have a colleague from the Customs and Excise, and he can answer questions from members. The EBD will adopt a methodology commonly used internationally to work out our recovery rate. In Hong Kong, it's about 52%, comparable to that of Singapore, which does not have a charge on MSW, and in Taipei, the rate is about 60%. So we are certainly not high compared with Taipei. Taipei is higher because they have MSW charge. So it has always been our blueprint to enhance our recovery rate. We are certainly not complacent with what we have now. There is room for improvement. We believe, we have this formula for working out our recovery rate is MSW recovered over MSW recovered plus MSW disposed. So exports and imports are separated from this formula, so there will certainly be no mixing up of figures. The recovery rate is worked out according to the annual total of recyclables exported from Hong Kong to other places for recycling, as compiled by the Census and Statistics Department, and also the annual total of MSW recycled locally. So we have a statistical formula for calculation. So the rate is certainly accurate. We have not taken into account imports and exports. And as for MSW disposed, the figures can be found from our landfills. So we focus on recovery rates, but we also want to suppress or lower the amount of landfilling. We want to lower that from 50% to 25%. This is a very clear target. The main recyclables in Hong Kong are waste paper, metal scraps, and waste plastics. Paper account for 40%, plastics and metal 30% respectively. Most of them are exported to the mainland or even to other countries. For the amount of waste metal recovered, the line fluctuates depending on the performance of our construction industry. And for waste paper, there is a steadily rising trend because there is this behavior on the part of the community. And for waste plastics, it is also a rising trend. However, we agree that there have been unusual fluctuations when it comes to the exportation of waste plastics out of Hong Kong. So starting from 2011, the EPD has started an internal review with government departments. And last year we decided to commission an independent consultancy to ascertain the generation and the recovery and recycling of waste plastics in Hong Kong, and the study will be completed by the end of this year. In the past 10 years, we have seen a steady increase in our recovery rate. Compared with very successful cities such as Taipei and South Korea, we are left behind by about 10%. But compared with Singapore, I think we are not doing. We're doing quite well. So we have steadily climbed from 36% to 40% when it comes to recovery rate. Thank you. The two officials from the Customs and Excise, do you have anything to add? Mr. Lam. Good morning, Chairman and members from the industry. I can supplement what Mr. Wong, the Secretary, said just now. The Customs and Excise adopt a risk assessment methodology in spot checking commodities into Hong Kong under the Import and Export Ordinance. From time to time, we have interdepartmental operations with other departments to ensure there is no smuggling activities. And we also act on intelligence if the relevant legislation is violated. Then under Basel Convention, we will demand that the company return the hazardous commodities back to the source country. Thank you. We welcome deputations and individuals to stay behind because members may also have follow-up questions for you to understand the operation of the trade. But if you have other engagements, you are free to leave. So it's up to you entirely. And I open the floor to members for questions. There are 4 members. I read their names out. Ms. Claudia Mo, Mr. Kok Wai Keung, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, Ms. Helena Wong, and also Mr. Sin Chung Kai. We will end at around noon. So I'll be loose in the beginning, so you can have about 5 to 7 minutes. But please ensure that there is time for Q&As. Ms. Claudia Mo. I am always very impressed by the performance of EPD. I think the department is committed to improving our environment. However, cable news first raised the issue of foreign rubbish, and then the responses by the EPD gave me the impression that they are very confusing. And then they keep saying that the reports are biased and are not reflecting the truth. However, the department has failed to tell us the truth, and this is so unfair to the media organization concerned. Obviously, yesterday you had a meeting with the media. Still, it is reported in the media that you have fabricated the figures for recovery. So I don't know, what is the mechanism of press release or information release from the department? Are you saying that foreign rubbish or waste, plastics in particular, is not being disposed of at our landfills at all? The figure is 0. Some of the waste has been returned, and for the remaining container loads, they are due for repatriation soon. So are you saying that 0 foreign rubbish, waste plastics in particular, has been dumped at our landfills? Now, we have many members from the industry here. They referred to a licensing system. I believe you will not say no to such a system, but it would take 3 to 4 years before it can be implemented. So what do you have to say about their operational difficulties? What can the government do to help them? Mr. Wong, thank you, Ms. Mo, for your views. I think the media reports are based on, I guess, the paper we've submitted to the panel today. I think their reports are based on the analysis of the paper you have in front of you. So, all our figures are fact-based. And Ms. Mo asked how we can send a clear message to the media. I get what you are talking about, and therefore we have explained the figures to you very carefully. All container loads into the mainland will not increase the burden on our landfills as a result of the OGF. We have a tracking system for all 189 container loads. Many of them have been shipped out of Hong Kong, and for the remaining stuck in Hong Kong, arrangements have been made. We've heard the aspiration from the industry as well as the community regarding the introduction of a licensing system. As I said, the CS4A now chairs a steering committee to support the local recycling industry. So we intend to meet during the summer, and then we'll continue this dialogue with the industry, hoping that we can support our local recycling industry. Perhaps my colleague can tell you something about the figures.
Before you talk about the figures, can you please respond to the point raised just now concerning the timetable for the licensing system? Well, we have to be realistic. The steering committee will convene its meeting next month, and this is on the agenda, and we are proactive in handling this. And at the same time, we will be talking with the industry to see how we can respond to them satisfactorily. Thank you, Ms. Mo, for the question. Thank you, Ms. Chairman. And the question just now was whether there is 0, that is for imported plastic recyclables, are 0% dumped into the landfills of Hong Kong. It has been mentioned by my colleagues just now that there is a control system, but right now we cannot, at the weighbridge at the landfill, know that this is whether it is locally generated or foreign refuse. And basically, we will ask them to unload at a certain site, and then we will inspect and find out whether it is locally generated or not. In fact, there was a photo just now that there are some local generated plastics which are of zero recyclable value because they are low quality. Perhaps they have been sorted already, picked out by the recycling industry. We don't know. But on the other hand, there are certain plastics which are very clearly generated in Hong Kong, but there are some and are of value, but there are some which are very contaminated or dirty and are of low quality in terms of recycling and that are dumped in the landfills. And starting from March of this year, a total of 120 tons of such materials have been dumped into the landfills. As for Ms. Mo's question, we do not have loadfuls or containerfuls of foreign rubbish dumped into our landfills because these foreign refuse are purchased from overseas, and of course they may be turned back because of the OGF. But if the industry had really done a make-up, quote unquote, and processed the refuse and have subsequently dumped them into the Hong Kong landfills, I do not feel the trade would actually do this because this is a huge quantity. But I have to say again that for loadfuls of refuse dumping into the landfills in Hong Kong, there is no loadfuls of foreign refuse. Now, in the paper, there are two tables. One, the quantities of recyclables exported, and the second table imported. In 2008, there is 310,000 tons of excess, and 2009, 16.9 tons, and in 2010, 57.6 tons. And after that, a negative number. I would like to know, really, where did the hundreds and thousands of tons of refuse go, if those are the numbers, and the imbalance between imports and exports? Mr. Lam? Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Members, for the question. Concerning these imported materials or waste, very often the Hong Kong recycling industry would sort them, and the quantity would be different from the imported amount, and the description would also be different. Because Hong Kong is a free port, there is no tax, and the trade declaration is also rather simple, and perhaps during the sorting, metals would be sorted out, and perhaps another exporter would do the trade declaration at the export out of Hong Kong. So there may be a discrepancy between import and export. In 2008 and 2010, for total exported quantities every year, it is bigger than the total imported figures. And in 2012, you can see just in this year, for plastics export, it is also higher than imports for plastics. So this is what we can see from the customs statistics. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Ms. Chairman. A few things I would like to find out. First of all, the representatives of the recycling trade, they emphasize that they have to pay money to buy these waste materials, and of course they would not just dump them into the landfills. I believe that, but the question is, would there be certain waste that you cannot recycle that have been sent to the landfills? And secondly, for the tax and levy system that we have now, is there a shredding and processing exercise, because from the TV we see that the bottles are very dirty, that there are all sorts of remnants of food, etc., drinks inside. And where do you actually do that kind of shredding and cleaning? Now, there is not a lot of cost incurred for re-export in Hong Kong, but on the other hand, if there is cleansing done to the waste in Hong Kong, well, that is cost for Hong Kong with water, etc., going into that kind of process. Now, my association is in support of recycling local generated waste, plastic waste, and to be recycled, for the waste to be recycled in Hong Kong. But for Hong Kong to be an re-export site for money making, we may not be in support of that. I hope you understand that. And also in terms of statistics, we have used a lot of time studying the statistics, and just now we were given the customs Mr. Lam Chun Kung was not able to give us the plastics waste number. He was only able to give us the total number, and he basically just cited the 2012 number, saying that export is bigger than import quantities, and that doesn't help us much. Now, I would want to talk about the 48% of recycling rate, and that is the total recycling rate divided by MSW recovered divided by MSW recovered plus MSW disposed. My question is, I would like to know the content of that formula. How can you be clear that for the export tonnage of recycled plastics generated in Hong Kong and the imported foreign plastics, how can you segregate the two effectively to see that there is no confusion? And in fact, there had been questions even at the start of this particular panel. 48% we have questioned. Are you saying that some 5 bottles out of 10 are actually recycled? Is that true? Can that be real? And if you look at the information from the media, it says that because Hong Kong has 0 tariffs, so the trade had been very honest and basically reported the actual weight. But because of the OGF and the customs in China, they have lowered the declared weight. Now, if the figures in Hong Kong are inaccurate, how can we have a realistic and accurate blueprint? Whom do you want to put that question to? The 2 gentlemen in the front, and that is Dr. Lau and Mr. Lam. Well, first of all, Mr. Lam. Mr. Lau, Dr. Lau. Well, the reason why we want a licensing system, perhaps you do not understand the trade. We have the entrepot trade or recyclers and the local recyclers. Now, for the cleansing of bottles, indeed they are cleansed in Hong Kong during the processing of these waste. For the ordinary household bottles generated, they are not very dirty. All we have to do is to soak them in clean water. But if you're talking about the licensing system for A-grade bottles imported from overseas, that is not a problem. They are well sorted and they are relatively clean. But as had been pointed out, there are mainland traders who are making their own purchases, and then grade C plastics are involved. In fact, there are recyclers in Hong Kong who basically package them and resell them. Now, for A-grade bottles, they may be $400 to $500 US per ton. But for C-grade bottles, they may be $200 US per ton. But of that load, 30% may be actual rubbish. Now, the OGF is going to be enforced on a sustained basis not like the measures in Hong Kong. Now, for Hong Kong-generated waste, if we can process them in Hong Kong, that is fine. Even if we are to dispose them into the landfills, it is admissible. Yes, thank you for your point. Mr. Lee, please. Now, we are talking about two levels. One, the treatment, and second, the actual present situation. In 2003, there was this promulgation of plastic bottles not being able to go into the mainland, and there had been a lot of these cleansing sites for rubbish or for waste in Hong Kong. And in 2004, this non-import was in word or name only, and a lot of the waste were not cleansed in Hong Kong anymore, and that is still the situation now. As for locally generated waste, well, before OGF, for collected waste, for high-value waste, such as plastic bottles, they were immediately cleansed and sent into China. But as for plastic bags and low-value waste, before the OGF, we were able to compact them, package them, and send them into the mainland, but no longer after OGF. And that is one of the reasons why it has become so expensive. Actually, 50% of the waste load is no longer sent off to the mainland, and as a result has become more expensive for us. For the figures, we will follow up in the next round of questioning. We have time for next round of questioning. Mr. Low, White Kwok. Yes, having heard the trade representatives, I now see that just for the re-export of waste or plastic waste, it is rather complicated. There are different grades of plastics, and there are different treatments for import and exports according to the different grades. And I have heard Mr. Chan of the association, you mentioned that some 8% to 10% of these waste bottles go to the landfills, actually. So that would be 300,000 tons per year. Now, Mr. Wong of the administration, you said that there is no foreign waste dumped into the Hong Kong landfills. Well, actually, there are none, because the trade said because these are worth some money, why would they directly go to the landfills? But in the processing process, as Mr. Chan had pointed out, the 300,000 tons going to the landfill. Do you know about this 300,000? Yes. What are this grade C waste? What are these other materials in this kind of grade C waste? So the administration's numbers are really not comprehensive and accurate. Now, also, I noticed that in 3.1, it says that the recyclables have estimated that there are 10,000 containers volume worth of waste accumulated in Hong Kong, and that's 200,000 tons of waste. Now, if at the end of the year there is no treatment or handling of this waste, then there will be 200,000 tons of waste dumped into the Hong Kong landfills. Even if they are at a loss for the industry, they will have to do that because there is no outlet. So this 200,000 tons of plastics will have to be dumped into our landfills. I hope there is a clarification today of what the measure is for this kind of accumulated waste, which really is a time bomb. This is 10,000 containers of waste accumulating in Hong Kong. I should allow time for the administration to respond, and if the trade would want to clarify the numbers here as reported by the media, please do so.
Mr. Wang, thank you. Dr. Low, for your questions. The large amount of container loads in Hong Kong, we are talking about imported materials into Hong Kong, and under our law, they are not allowed to be dumped into our landfill. So if they are found at our landfills that they imported, they will not be allowed. So members can rest assured we'll certainly take enforcement action. It's true that the OGF in the mainland will continue. I think there will be positive impacts because of OGF, there will no longer be consolidated container loads. They will disappear. They will gradually be phased out. So to be forward-looking, I think this is a positive development. And members are concerned about the definition. My colleague will supplement. Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Low asked about Mr. Cheng Shek-kwan's allegation that 200,000 tons of plastic residue in Hong Kong, even after washing of the plastics. Yes, we've discussed with Mr. Wong. We would like to know whether this has already started in Hong Kong. If yes, we would like to go and see. As far as I understand, the procedures have not yet started. I know some recyclers are starting to deal with locally generated waste plastics. There is indeed a shredding and washing. But for large quantities of waste plastics imported to Hong Kong for such processes, well, we haven't got such information with us. We have to find out from Mr. Chen first. As far as I understand it, you have not started the process yet. If yes, we can further communicate. Is it true that some residues have to be dumped? We will have to understand more first. Dr. Low. So according to Mr. Wong, such refuse will not be allowed into our landfills. But what are we going to do with them? If the OGF continues, well, will you just allow them to burn them down? So what will be your follow-up action? And can Mr. Chen please confirm, is this estimate of 300,000 tons per year accurate or not? Or is it already happening? Do you want Mr. Cheng Shek-kwan to answer? Yes. I think as Dr. Chen said, the industry for a long time has been helping imported waste plastics to go through reprocessing. For instance, some plastics imported to Hong Kong is very light. So instead of 200 kilograms per pack, we compact them into a ton per pack. Of course, there would be shreds in the process. We'll have to collect such shreds. And according to Customs and Excise and EPD, this is locally generated, so there will be no statistics held by the by the EPD in relation to such shreds. So according to Dr. Chen, this is already happening, or rather Mr. Chen Shek-kwan said that this has been happening for many years. Waste from imported plastics have been dumped into our landfills all along. And for plastic wastes accumulated in Hong Kong, how are we going to deal with them? Please ask the Secretary to follow up. Just a very short follow-up, otherwise I will ask Dr. Low to ask in the second round to be fair to other members. Dr. Chen, a brief reply. I was referring to the process of cleaning and shredding. And I think Mr. Chen is talking about consolidating the waste plastics. Well, this is not really reprocessing. All right, no matter what are the processes, if it is indeed generating 300,000 tons or 200,000 tons of waste plastics to our landfills, that is an issue. It doesn't matter. We are here to find out the truth. There may be things unknown to the government departments or customs and excise, and that's why the industry has proposed a licensing regime. I hope that our target is fact-finding, and then let's see what administrative measures and legislation can be put in place to plug the loopholes. Now, if waste plastics are so valuable, why don't we recover our own plastic waste and recycle them ourselves? Then there is no need for importation. Perhaps you may want to know that Hong Kong is a very among the rare places in Southeast Asia where we have entrepot trade of waste plastics. Ms. Helena Wong. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Secretary and our government officials told us that Hong Kong is a free port and therefore we can have no control over imports and exports into Hong Kong. Then I'm really worried. I'm afraid that Hong Kong will be a free port for refuse. If OGF has decided that no grade C waste plastics will be accepted in the mainland, and if we do not have any legislation in Hong Kong to control importation of grade C refuse into Hong Kong, then as said, at least 30% of it will finally be dumped into our landfills. This is a big issue. If even the mainland has decided not to profit from such a highly polluted waste so that they will not pollute their land and water, so why have we chosen to allow this to happen in Hong Kong? Has the administration got very clear and stringent standards for importation of refuse, foreign rubbish? What category of waste plastics can be allowed into Hong Kong? If eventually 10 or 20, 30% of such waste will be dumped into our landfills, this is unacceptable to the public. Because Tak Kwu Ling, Tuen Mun, and Tseung Kwan O are against the extension of landfills. You may say that, well, landfills are necessary because we are generating waste in Hong Kong. We have to put out of the odor. Well, and at the same time, you say that foreign rubbish has to be dumped into our landfills as well, then you are fooling Hong Kong people. So do we have clear legislation to regulate the importation of foreign rubbish into Hong Kong? And if the mainland has got the OGF, what are their standards? And do corresponding measures have to be taken in Hong Kong if they do not accept categories B or C waste plastics, then such things should not be allowed into Hong Kong as well. Otherwise, we may be supporting the recycling industry to make profit, and Hong Kong has to accept the waste. No, we support the recycling industry so as to lower the amount of MSW dumped into landfills. All right, you want us to cut waste at source, and if at the same time you are importing waste into Hong Kong, this is a big problem. So, Secretary, if categories B, C plastics cannot be re-exported through Hong Kong, what is the view of the industry? Will it cause you to go under? Will it make it impossible for you to deal with locally generated waste as well? Who should answer this question? Whoever. Let me share with you my experience. Well, my company, well, for instance, the Environment Bureau in Germany will come to inspect our operations, and they also go to the final destination on the mainland to ensure that there will be clean clean waste imported into Hong Kong, grade C. Certainly not grade B and grade C, because they fear repatriation. But for countries in South America, well, they do not have similar practices. Well, we can regard that as normal trade, because we have over 3 million tons of refuse being re-exported in Hong Kong. Transportation, logistics are involved. If this is banned, that would mean a major reduction in business for these sectors. Well, this is entry port trade, and we should allow them to continue to come to Hong Kong. Now, for grade A and grade B commodities, well, the wastage will be very low, because among our grade B and grade C, grade B waste, now if the wastage is less than 10%, then of course the cost will be lower. So I think it is good if you have regulation to control the quantity of waste or quality of waste, plastics, allowed into Hong Kong. Members asked whether our recycling industry will go under. Let me tell you that those engaged in entry port trade are not really recyclers. They are traders. They are in the trading business. Now, we want you to introduce a licensing regime so as to really support the recycling industry. Now, whether the statistics quoted were true or not, I don't know. We have 300,000 tons of waste residue accumulated in Hong Kong. If we have a licensing system, then there will be some department to enforce the legislation. Now, this will help to boost the quality of all recyclers all over the world. For instance, grade A would mean milk bottles, glass bottles. Why do we have numbers 2 to 7 bottles? Well, because the cost is lower in the mainland. A licensing system will not cause us to go under, will only allow our trade to prosper. Secretary, in principle, we have legislation to ensure that imported waste cannot be dumped into landfills in Hong Kong. And OGF is conducive to the whole recycling industry. All containers returned because of OGF will also be repatriated. They will not be stuck in Hong Kong. All right, please. Members asked whether about 300,000 tons of foreign rubbish residue will be dumped into landfills after processing. Please refer to Annex 2 of our paper. Well, in the past decade or so, we have monitored the actual quantity of MSW disposed at landfills. The bars in black well, according to our regular analysis of MSW dumped, well, the black chart bars are waste plastics. They account for about, for instance, we have 9,000 tons of MSW dumped into landfills, and they account for about 20%, so it is around 1,800 tons. These are figures for the past 10 years, and they've remained rather steady even before that. Of course, most of our MSW dumped are from domestic households and commercial operations, and waste plastics account for this percentage. If we have 300,000 tons of foreign rubbish residue after processing, that means it will be about 1,000 tons per day. So if 5 tons per per truck would mean 200 vehicle trips every day when the container, when the vehicles enter our disposal facility, we will check them. So it is impossible that 1,000 tons of plastic waste is being dumped into our landfills. Impossible. All right, 1,000 tons per day. That means we're generating only a very small quantity of waste plastics daily. If we track the statistics for the past few decades, this is not true. So the industry claims that such process has taken place in Hong Kong, and a small proportion of the residue might have mixed with our local waste. But if we look at the chart here, it is quite impossible. We do not have any concrete figures to substantiate this claim. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, well, I will not argue about the figures, because I think the administration has given us quite a clear account. Of course, I want you to monitor at landfills. According to Mr. Wong, there will be about 200 vehicle trips to our landfills because of the foreign rubbish. I'd like to hear from the industry regarding the proposed licensing system.
With licensing, there will be thresholds allowing only certain people to enter the trade, and those without the license will be left out the door. So there are advantages and disadvantages. There are bodies who come up to us to say that licensing would increase the cost of production, etc., etc. Would licensing be effective? I mean, there is already some ordinances, even though it may not be perfect, the legal regime. And also there are at the checkpoints and at customs, there are also trade declaration system. So what kind of advantages and effects do you expect with the licensing system introduced? Who will answer that question? Yes, if I can just respond to that, at least in part. Well, association have been in contact with our members, and we have been discussing the present Hong Kong situation. There are a lot of visitors coming into Hong Kong who can freely conduct trade in Hong Kong while in Hong Kong. And these people, with this with this kind of visa coming into Hong Kong, not only can they bring formula milk across the border, but in fact they can engage in other trades. I mean, this is in a sense illegal trading to lug such, whether it be formula milk or waste, over the border to China. And of course, Hong Kong people are in support of recycling, but nobody wants there to be a recycling site or shop around where they live. That's true for most of the people in Hong Kong, and we understand that. As an industry, we understand that there are certain hygiene, etc. effects on the neighborhood. And at present, the smaller operations for recycling and hopefully, in fact, it's been discussed that the ground level of flyovers would be opened for activities and trade, but of course our trade have not been able to enter into those sites as yet. But in any case, with this kind of policy, with the opening up of more room for operation for the industry, it would be beneficial for all. Yes. Actually, a few years ago, we have already raised this possibility of licensing the waste vehicles so that they will not cheat on the weight. And also, for certain contractors, they have already entered into agreements with certain residential estates, but there's competition for collection of waste in these developments, and as a result, the fees have gone down because of fierce competition. Well, the point mentioned about threshold or possibility of threshold being too high is a possibility. Now, for those recycling businesses that are in rather simple processing, engaged in simple processing, perhaps they cannot be licensed. Now, for license A and B, for instance, some of the recyclers will not be able to engage in more advanced stages. For example, license A would be able to go all the way to producing recycled products, but license C would only be able to cleanse the waste, etc. Perhaps that is one way forward. But you know what? Indeed, the waste is in our hands. But whom do we send the waste to? For the big recyclers, they are working on environmental protection principles. They will have to look at our site to see whether we are really environmentally friendly and we are in full compliance with those principles. And they would know that the cleansers are very clear. There are the household kitchen waste, etc. Well, actually, I think the point is very clear. The recyclers should have an international licensing or certain certification. Can't the recyclers get this international certification? Well, I think Hong Kong is different from overseas. In the past decade, 60 years, I think Dr. Lau had been in the industry for 60 years in Hong Kong, and it is a well-established system. The recyclers' role in Hong Kong, apart from, some persons in the industry claim that it is a trade, but in fact, I can tell you, it is just a transport business. From the cleaners, we receive the waste, we get the waste, and then we transport it to the big recycling concerns. Well, if it's that simple an activity, why do we have to license them? Well, for the simple reason, as I have mentioned earlier, if there is funding for the industry, how can we ascertain that the waste actually goes to the recycling industry in Hong Kong so that the waste can really be recycled into products? That's the role of the steering committee. Well, perhaps the funding can be on quantity basis. Let's say $1 Hong Kong for 8 bottles, something like that. Why do we have to license it? It seems to be leaving some out the door of entering the industry. Well, time's up. I don't think there will be an answer for that question, but I think there will be a lot of other opportunities for discussing licensing system or possible licensing system. Well, I have a declaration of interest, even though I'm a very small shareholder, but my family is engaged in a waste lifting and unloading and unloading business. Well, I think environmental protection is something that is emphasized by the government, and it provides certain trade opportunities, and nobody would engage in unprofitable trade. Rubbish is not profitable. Hong Kong has rubbish, and China has its own rubbish. First of all, we have to define what is overseas or foreign rubbish. Grade A, B, and C, what exactly is the content of that kind of so-called rubbish? From the industry, I heard that grade A is really very clean, molded plastics, and is not contaminated. For example, the milk bottle would be 95% plastic and no milk. Now, grade B would be perhaps soft drink bottles, and grade C would be, 20-30% actual rubbish. And also, Ms. Sitho mentioned just now whether it is generated in Hong Kong. I heard that there is also Vietnam. Well, I'm saying there's a tiny quantity. Well, yes, noted. Excuse me. In fact, there's always been accumulated rubbish in Hong Kong, but that is not true. But that is also true for other countries and areas as well. Now, a third point, cheating on weight. Is that just a responsibility of the recyclers? I mean, there are ways such as soaking in water to add to the weight and collecting soft drink cans. They were also traded on weight. When I was a teenager, we poured sand into the cans to add to the weight. And after that, the cans were paid on a per can basis, because whatever measure you come up, there will be someone who can think up of something to circumvent it. Now, perhaps this has to do with, perhaps there will be clash of interest. Now, for waste paper recycled industry, at the ports, there are no facilities. For example, the lifts are uncovered. For example, it's yellow rain warning today, and the waste paper would be all soaked during the loading and unloading, and that would add to the weight. I mean, the reason why the foreign waste is more quote-unquote desirable, because there are subsidies from the overseas governments to the waste industry. So they are more competitive in that sense. Now, on licensing, I think this is a possibility that we can study and follow, perhaps. But on the other hand, we should have a study, first of all, and a review. Dr. Lau mentioned licensing. But what exactly how is it to be done? I think we need time to discuss that. And also, I heard a figure, 48%. I think the government needs to clarify that number. I think this may not be inflated, this recycle rate, but you have to specify what's in that recycled volume. Does it include ferrous or metals and waste paper, etc.? Now, when I board the MTR or the train, if I get a free newspaper, when I leave the train, someone would be there to collect the newspaper from me. And also, even before, at the beach, even before I finish a can of drink, someone would be waiting for the can to be collected. But really, we are not talking about paper and metal, we're talking about plastic. I think the recycled percentage of plastics is lower than paper and metals because the cost relatively are higher. So there should be subsidies, not just for the NGOs from the government. The Yen Oi Tong is also making a loss, tens of millions of dollars. And well, please mind your language. Please mind your language. Right. I think the government will have to be very careful to see how the NGO or funding for the NGO and subsidies for the industry can be well planned so that there will be a true development for the industry. Taiwan is doing it very well. There's a very good cooperation between government and the industry. And also for the main exporters, foreign exporters, we should understand their standards and also the mainland standards. We are caught in between Hong Kong. The foreign waste that comes to Hong Kong, sometimes they're wrongly shipped to Hong Kong. Can there be some help for the trade to lower this kind of misshipment or the necessity for repatriation of waste? Answer the question, Mr. Wong, within 1 minute. Yes, if I can just respond to the point concerning subsidizing or assisting the recycling trade in Hong Kong. And this is very clear. The steering committee will come up with certain measures and there will be land sites made available to them as well.
Dr. Chen, the recovery rate is derived from MSW recovered divided by MSW recovered plus MSW disposed. Every year we ask the exporters for the figures. So we have really taken out re-exports, because when they feel out of form, they will have to say to declare whether the waste is re-export or from local. So as I said, some recyclers are consolidating recyclables. Will that be counted towards our total amount of waste declared? Well, we're not too sure, and that's why we have to commission a consultancy. As I said, the curve for plastics are fluctuating rather strangely, and in 2010 we felt that the total amount of waste plastics in Hong Kong should not be that high, and then we want to cover items that are really recycled into products in Hong Kong that is very low, just about 1.5%, and that cover waste plastics and clothing and also waste paper. I will ask my questions in the first round first, otherwise I won't have a chance. The calculation of recovery rates, according to the government's paper, you would also cover the exported quantity. Will you include those re-exported? This is important. Will they have to fill in the form whether it is imported into Hong Kong for re-export purpose? The waste is not counted, but we do not rule the possibility that with waste imported into Hong Kong, but after some process in Hong Kong, such as consolidating or mixing, the recycler may regard that as being locally generated waste. The customs may want to supplement. We believe that might be the case. Then I think the industry will have to fill out the form by saying that it is for re-export, because pure importation is not allowed. So will the customs ensure that the waste imported into Hong Kong for re-export is totally exported out of Hong Kong? Will the customs track such imported waste with members of the industry? Well, when the waste is imported into Hong Kong, and if it is not re-exported in the same vessel, it is regarded as imported goods. As regards how the importers deal with the waste, will it be stuck in Hong Kong for some time pending a purchase by overseas buyers? Well, there's the possibility that we cannot track the whereabouts of such waste. Instead of saying that it is waste that is declared as plastic material, then you cannot track the final destination of such products as well. So shouldn't you change your declaration regulations so if it is indeed waste, the entry should not be plastic materials, but waste plastics instead? If you allow re-exporters to just say waste plastics and you cannot track their whereabouts eventually, then they can really be dumped into our landfills, because according to the trade, the percentage can be up to 10 to 30%. Since the industry, who is so familiar with the operation, cannot confirm whether 10 or 30% of the waste is stuck in Hong Kong, certainly they would not be burned away. So we've also heard that some storage yards have had fires. Is it because they cannot find an outlet for the waste for the waste plastics? They might as well burn them. But this is undesirable, because a burning of plastic can generate toxic gases. So you really have to check your declaration requirements. You have to ensure that you have to check whether the statistics of importation and re-exportation tally. If not, you have to ask the recyclers to be responsible. Secretary or Dr. Chen? Members asked about the imbalance or the difference. No, it's true that in general, exportation, the recyclables exported is higher than that imported. It may be true that the content of waste of plastics in the waste upon exportation and importation are different. So this is natural. You can't say that this difference will result in extra burden to our landfills. Thank you, Secretary. But according to the industry, if it is grade C waste, then there can be 30 to 40% contaminants, and even paper diapers can be found. So can the industry tell us what are the contaminants in the waste? For instance, will all the recyclable materials be produced into recycled products, and what are the contaminants in there? And what is the percentage of grade C imported into Hong Kong annually? Mr. Lee. I can comment on the export and import figures. According to data from the mainland, every year in 2011, they accepted only 1 million to 1.2 million tons of waste from Hong Kong. They got that through supplying enterprises. I'm sure they were at least grade B waste. And for grade C, well, you have grade D waste, even worse. However, such waste will not be stranded in Hong Kong. Or we talk about the outlets through supplying enterprises, and after the inspection, the total amount in 2011 was 1 million to 1.2 million tons. And through Vietnam, for instance, it doesn't matter how you declare in the form. It can be waste plastics or whatever. So the waste is already exported through another channel. So the mainland only accepted about 1 million tons of waste plastics from Hong Kong. Can you please tell us what are the contaminants found in grade C waste? I can't really describe to you exactly, because you can find really very bad things, but they will certainly not be in Hong Kong. Because after 2008, there was already one occasion when waste was stuck in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong people already have the experience. Waste of very poor quality will not be imported into Hong Kong at all. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, I think there are several aspects of the matter. Members talked about the tracking mechanism of waste imported and then exported from Hong Kong. The industry told us a very real problem, and according to declaration documents, and there is discrepancy in the exporting and importing figures. So I think the Secretary should think about tracking arrangements. And OGF in the mainland will only accept waste plastics of a certain quality. So we must face up to this problem seriously. And then it's about how we view recyclable materials and also the recycling process in Hong Kong. Earlier, in my discussion with the industry, we believe that the processing and transportation steps are very expensive. Has the administration ever done any calculation from the point of recovery to end product? Do you know the actual cost? Because this is important. If the costs are very high, then perhaps the government should think of an alternative to ensure that there is already some sorting at source. Many countries have many measures to ensure sorting at source, such as public education, charging, and also a standard price tag for different types of plastics, so that you know that for this kind of plastic, the unit fee is like this, and then you have different prices for different types of plastics, so that even at the point of collection, you can sort some of the waste plastics already, so that the industry doesn't have to employ too big a staff to wash the plastics and to sort them. So has the administration estimated the cost involved so that we can do more at the point of generation? And we have 2 more levy schemes in the pipeline. I think we should try to support the industry. For instance, you want me to use less plastic bags and generate less waste, but in fact, I will produce waste enough. And do you have ways to help me to reduce the bulk of waste? So have you got the idea of cost chain? Thank you. For the first question, my colleague will supplement. The second question is about the overall social costs. And how do we work out the life cycle of products? It's true that we need to tackle this problem with new and innovative ideas. And we have already set up a steering committee which will meet for the first time next month, and we will see how we can review the proper use of resources, the use of land resources, and our procurement policies. And I hope that our proposed levy scheme will have the support of the whole community, and we will also consider the social cost in the handling of waste. Mr. Wong, since the introduction of OGF in the mainland, as I said, we have stepped up communication with China Customs. And we have adopted a 2-pronged approach. We inspect imported waste, and then for all vehicles of waste transported to our landfills, we also inspect them.
And for imports of plastics waste of different grades, we have already enhanced our inspection and spot checking of these. And we find that much of it is actually entrepot trade. And for the point of import, the shipping company involved, the forwarder, we actually request more detailed and clearer information so as to help us track the waste, so that we make sure that the imported waste is indeed exported at the end. And in our spot checking and inspection, we will be utilizing different sources of information and also step up our liaison with Hong Kong Customs. And where we find that there are problematic persons, recyclers, for instance, we will pay special attention to them. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we understand that they will be enhancing their efforts in inspection. But the question is, within the existing legal regime, you do not have the framework to allow you this kind of work with whatever inspection actions you have. At the end of the day, how can you, within the existing legal framework, achieve what you want to achieve by way of, for example, taking up prosecution and other actions so that the importers will really carefully and truthfully declare information? Well, I think his measure is to not allow the foreign waste being dumped into the Hong Kong landfills. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. In the law, it is actually very clear, the stipulation concerning import and export of waste. Now, it has been mentioned that sometimes we're talking about foreign rubbish and sometimes about valuable waste. Now, in Appendix 7, foreign rubbish is about household rubbish and other waste, and if it is imported into Hong Kong, these are foreign rubbish, which is intended for re-export out of Hong Kong. If there are instances of recyclers importing such rubbish and dumping into the Hong Kong landfills, whatever he cannot retrieve or recycle, this is an offense. $50,000 plus 2 years of imprisonment if it's over 200 tons in 6 months' time. That is the penalty. And also the person concerned will have to repatriate the waste to the place of origin using his own financial resources. But of course, at the point of import, they would not say that this is foreign rubbish. They would say that this is imported waste, and if it is a bona fide trade and there is a normal and regular import-export trade activity, then that would not be problematic in our eyes. But on the other hand, if the recycler is saying that because this is no longer lucrative, so what I've imported, the waste that I've imported, I would dump into the Hong Kong landfills, well, that is not admissible. It's illegal. So this will also get caught in the existing legislation. It is an illegal action to do so. And this is very clear, this requirement. In February, with the start of OGF, in March and in June, we have issued 2 times letters to the shipping companies, forwarders in Hong Kong, and transport companies in Hong Kong. So the trade is very clearly in the know about this. But of course, we will very closely monitor the situation as it develops. If there should be any problems, we will definitely work with the relevant departments to follow up. And where we have the evidence, we will make prosecutions. 4 members would want to ask questions the second round, but some of them are not in the room. When they return, I will have to allow them the opportunity to ask the second round. Now, who is in the first round still? Chan Ka-lok, first round. Yes, 7 minutes will be allocated to you. The meeting will be extended to 12:15, and then we will, after Mr. Chan's question, allow the second round of questioning. Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Excuse me for being late, but I will try not to repeat what other members have asked, and I would not need 7 minutes, hopefully. I'm looking at paragraph 22 in the paper concerning an independent study, and I have heard from colleagues that this question had not been asked just now. It seems the government is aware of a very clear question. That is, there is an imbalance between the import and export numbers, and therefore you want to have a consultant, an independent consultant, to conduct a detailed study to ascertain the production, recovery and disposal of waste plastics in Hong Kong. And by the end of the year, there should be a preliminary study results, and the study is in process. It seems the administration is trying to give us an assurance to say that there's been a lot of measures put into place and things are being stepped up, efforts are being stepped up, etc. Now, for all these commitments and the assured measures, I would like to know specifically, how do those things tie in with the independent consultant study? Would there be a incongruence at the end of the day? The question is, do you want to find out from this consultant study whether the declaration is sufficient, whether the legislation is sufficient, or whether the licensing system is a workable way forward, or whether the self-regulation of the trade is good enough? So is it a review of the measures, or is it a policy review? What is the purpose of the study? Now, for the three materials in Hong Kong, metals because of engineering, industrial, and therefore the fluctuations, and paper we all understand, but plastics is not so normal. And for example, it's very high in 2012 and then much lower in 2011, etc. So there are these recovery rate fluctuations, and that is what we want to understand for this independent study. Yes, this independent study includes the calculation of the recovery rate. Even though the formula we use is a regular formula adopted all over the world, but in Hong Kong we have a lot of recovered materials which are exported. Very little is actually recycled in Hong Kong. For metals and paper, they may not be problems, but for plastics, we also found that the quantity seems to be a bit too high in terms of the rate. So is this not the right way to look at or calculate the rate? Perhaps some declarations were that it is a local generated waste, but in fact it was imported waste that are being repackaged and consolidated into containers, and while in Hong Kong, etc. We want to find out. This is exactly the purpose of the study, but they will not be looking at or reviewing the policy. That is not their ambit. They will not be reviewing the licensing, or the possibility of licensing system, or the existing measures, etc. No, but rather how the data or the rate is compiled. So the independent consultant will have to go to the front line and talk to the industry and go through the entire cycle. Yes, definitely. Yes, they will talk to the industry. Yes, they will have to look closely at the operation of the industry. As we have heard just now, the recycling industry in Hong Kong has different facets to it. And some are really just traders, some are recyclers, some are really only in transport, some want to do processing from the waste, etc. But all surrounding or revolving plastics and not metals or paper. Yes, thank you. Ms. Chairman, I think we are all eager to know the truth. We eagerly await the results of the study and the data. That is the reason why I followed up with the questions that I've asked. And it seems that administration is also concerned about the relatively high rate and the fluctuation of that rate for plastics. Now, I think this is worth pursuing. And we will definitely follow up when the study is completed. 5 members. Yes, I've read out their names just now, even though we have extended the meeting to 12:15, but excuse me for allowing each only 2 minutes. Claudia Mo. Well, foreign waste or rubbish cannot be disposed in the Hong Kong landfills. That is illegal. But can you assure us that it is zero foreign rubbish and plastics? Of course, it's very difficult for you to do so. I understand that. But Mr. Chan of the deputation said that Federation of Hong Kong Recycle chairman said that every year there are some 300,000 tons of processed waste. And Mr. Wong Tak-fai from the administration said, no, this is impossible, Mr. David Wong said, because that would be, too many vehicles going into the land sites, and it's just not possible just from that information. You're talking about almost zero to a claimed 300,000 tons. I hope you can respond to that discrepancy in estimate, and perhaps the deputation, the Federation can also explain. Yes. Appendix 2. This kind of, Annex 2, this kind of data had been compiled for over 10 years. Do you have a professional estimate? Because the range is from zero, your claim, to 300,000 tons, their claim. And when you said just now a small quantity, what exactly are you talking about? Well, the simple answer is that we do not have a basis for professional estimate. For all over Hong Kong, 9,000 tons of waste each day generated in Hong Kong. 6,000 tons are household. The rest is business and industry. That would include all the industrial activities generated solid waste in Hong Kong. And within that, if there is that kind of industrial activity, there will be plastics in that. Because all for the entire Hong Kong, the plastics generated is just 1,800 tons in terms of plastic waste. Now, the black part of the chart in Annex 2, how did we come to those figures? Well, we have an MSW content proportion, and we do this by sorting, and every year we will have 2 such exercises spanning 70 days in total with 400 samples gathered, and statistically this is an acceptable sampling level. For example, for 1 cubic meter of waste, we will have workers within this 1 cubic meter of waste sort out the plastics, what type of plastic bags and paper, other plastics, etc. Sort them. So every year when we publish this waste report, which is also available in the website, we would say, for example, glass is 300 tons. This is how we come to those numbers. So when we count, we will count whether this is supermarket plastic bags or plastic bags for bread or for shopping, etc. So statistically, this is acceptable. the level. And it is a very detailed process. We'll be very happy if you're interested, members. Next time would be fall of this year. Then perhaps you can all see how the sorting is actually done by our officers so that you will understand this process more. And from this, we extrapolate the Annex 2 results as explained by Mr. Wong. It's an extrapolation, 9,000 tons, and we have 400 items of sampling, or 400 samples, and this is statistically acceptable. And this 80% or 90% of plastics is also extrapolated from there.
The daily weight of 9,300 tons, is that a real figure? Yes, this is a real figure, exact figure, because we weight the waste for paying the contractors, so there won't be any mistake. Well, the 300,000 tons, waste imported to Hong Kong might be a grade C, grade B. Some, for instance, they might be soil, mud, paper, diapers, and also planks. So these are the residue. Dr. Wai Kwong. When we had the meeting when we had the Bills Committee to consider the extended levy scheme for PSBs, I already raised this request, and that is we must have all the information on the local generation, importation, and exportation of waste paper, waste plastics, and metal scrap in Hong Kong so that we can be shown the full picture. While we have some information today, but this is not the full picture I saw it last time. We see that there's been improvement in the recovery rate. However, it has dropped recently from its peak of 52% to 48%. So this is worrying. And the industry has also asked the administration to give them support in the recycling process. On various occasions, I have already put this request to the administration, and I reiterate once again here. And then it is impossible for Hong Kong to recycle all its recyclable materials. We only have a population of 7 million, and we are more a consuming society than a manufacturing society. So we have to rely on other places for recycling materials. So the administration must really discuss with the mainland authorities to how we can have a circular economy. Hong Kong must play a part in the circular economy so that we can resolve part of our questions, and we can also support or contribute to the recycling industry. Ms. Helena Wong. Grade C refuse, after they are imported into Hong Kong, what proportion of the trade is buying in grade C refuse for processing and dump the residue into our landfills? Do you have this information? And also the difference before and after the introduction of OGF? It is difficult for the industry to tell you they're under pressure. Mr. Lee, well, it cannot be if I don't answer this question. So 189 container loads have been returned. Well, there are two parties in the industry holding such materials. One is the manufacturer in the mainland, and the other party is those who are in the plastic industry, manufacturing industry. And then subsequent to the UK incident, now businessmen are not foolish. We know that such things cannot be dumped into our landfills. So let's disregard the situation before 2011 because there is already something in the past. Some of us are only made aware of the OGF in recent months, but for some of us, we have had many meetings with the mainland authorities. We've got plants in the mainland, and we have done what we can according to the requirements of the China Customs and the Ministry of Environmental Protection. They know very well what are the requirements. Oh, thank you. However, I believe because of OGF, grade C foreign rubbish or recyclable materials cannot be accepted. If even diapers can be found, I'm sure OGF will not accept such waste. So I don't think my question has been answered. Are we going to tighten the regulation or the control over the importation of grade C waste? Are we going to tighten our control when it comes to the importation of grade C foreign rubbish? The customs, I can explain, perhaps at the point of importation there is no distinction. Is that right? Because the declaration is rather rough. Our declaration requirements are relatively simple. So you're going to have to declare whether it is waste, plastics, or metal scrap, or waste paper. Well, that is the crux of the matter. We have forgotten this entrepot trade. They might be the source of waste for Hong Kong. Even the mainland has tightened their definition of recyclable materials. For instance, such materials must be clearly sorted and cleansed. Well, we only have 2 minutes each. Yes, then you have to provide clearer definition for recyclable materials in at the point of importation. I think we discussed this crux of the matter at 11:45 a.m. I think we should tighten inspection because no matter how stringent your requirements are, they may not give you the truth at the point of declaration. So inspection is important. So before and after the introduction of OGF, we have enhanced our inspection efforts, and the industry has made it clear that they are for profit in business. They will not continue to import waste that do not have any outlet. So we will not allow substandard waste to be imported into Hong Kong. I'm afraid we really have only got 2 minutes, Mr. Wu Chiwai. How can the administration tell that waste plastics dumped into our landfills are genuinely locally generated? Because if the plastics are polluted, they can be dumped into our landfills. So how can you tell whether they are really from Hong Kong or imported? Thank you, Mr. Wu. As I said, we have 120 tons dumped into our landfills, and they should be locally generated. Mr. Wu asked, how can we tell? Now, if recycler tells us that this is recovered, but it is too polluted, it can't be used. And if it is intercepted at our landfills, we will require the suspected loads to be stockpiled for the time being, and we will have colleagues to inspect meticulously. They have to break up the packing to see whether there is any Hong Kong label. For instance, if it is beverage available in our market, then there should be a label. And if the label is in German, for instance, we know that it is not from Hong Kong. So we'll rely on such methods to see whether it is imported or locally generated. However, plastic bags imported may not have any label because it's white in color. Then in such case, we won't be able to tell. But do we know whether it has recyclable value or not? Well, we can judge from experience. If it is so dirty that there is soil, and if it is odorous, and the plastic bags are all torn, then we can say that they have no recyclable value. But for items that still have recyclable value, we hope eco-park operations can process them. We thank the trade for telling us how the industry operates. I'm sure this will assist the panel as well as the public to understand the whole thing. We urge the customs and excise to tighten the declaration requirements. You must track the entrepot traders to ensure that such waste will not be finally dumped into our landfills. Because of time constraint, we have not yet discussed how we can promote the development of the recovery and recycling industry in Hong Kong. So after the summer recess, I will convene the meeting and invite all stakeholders, including community organizations and social enterprises, to meet with us and tell us what are the missing links resulting in a lack of development of the recycling industry. There are business opportunities involved, and if we do it well, then there is no need to export waste. I think only by promoting the development of the recycling industry can we lower the reliance on landfilling. Thank you very much for your attendance. Meeting adjourned.